Hello everyone, this is the Metal3 meeting. It's Wednesday, 1st of April, and we are going to start this meeting with a short introduction round. If there's anybody on the call who is just new at joining our meeting and would want to introduce themselves, please do so now. I will shortly pause for this.
Hello, my name is Mika Koskimäki and I'm working in Electron Software Technologies.
Welcome. Anybody else?
Hello, Digambar. I'm working on it.
Sorry, it seems that your microphone, there was an issue in between, we didn't really hear what you said.
Okay, hi, I'm Digambar. I'm working on hardware plus for that.
Okay, well, let's then get going and dive into the core of the meeting. So don't hesitate to add new topics here at the mark where there is this add new topics. If you want to discuss something during this meeting, just add it there. Like Mika, I saw you sent an email on the mailing list that you wanted to discuss something. Okay, you have added it already to the agenda. Good. Okay, so let's get started. The first point is about machine remediation and health check work group. We had a meeting yesterday with Nir, Andrew, Jan, and Feruz. If one of you wants to say something about this.
Yes, hello, this is Jan Tilles from EST. So as Mile mentioned, we had a meeting yesterday. Also Andrew Beekhoff was attending on that one, and Nir and Andrew are from Red Hat, and we other guys are from EST. And what we discussed yesterday was the work that the Red Hat is working on OpenShift for the machine health check and remediation parts, and we want to backport some of that work to part of the CAPM3, and also we would like to have some changes in cluster API health check that it allows to infrastructure providers to have their own logic for this remediation. So we are planning to open a couple of new proposals, probably one against the cluster API, and then we also started to develop our own controller for the remediation in CAPM3. That is ongoing work now, and probably we're gonna be working within this group. And of course, if there are anybody else interested, please check out the upcoming proposals, and also feel free to contact any of us to get in. Does Ferus want to add anything on here?
Yeah, I thought that maybe it's worth to say a few words from high level on this work group. So machine remediation is the basic concept of self-healing failing nodes. So we currently talk about, for example, rebooting, power cycling a bare metal host if we detect some failure on it. So this is the context of this work group, and this might expand to other topics as well. And Feruz and Jan, let me know if you want to discuss my suggestion or about the remediate function, or if this is clear.
Yeah, I think we should discuss that much further. That's for sure. To make sure, I think your input will be needed before we starting to implement the final solution in CAPM3. How we should do and where should we add that one. We can also discuss that within the group. But if you want to say something now, please do so.
Yeah, so I was just thinking that currently the machine health check controller is deleting the machine objects whenever he detects a failure. So I thought that instead of deleting it, it could just call some remediate function that is provider specific. We need to explore how V1 Alpha 3 works because the only pattern I know is the actuator one, which is not relevant anymore. So I'll need to take a look there.
Yeah, so that is the main change that we want to have in cluster API health check, that it allows some with some annotation or label or whatever to providers to implement their own remediation logic. And in CAPM3 we have a controller that is looking for these annotations, and based on those doing our specific remediation. So what we really need is to understanding what we need from cluster API health check to provide what kind of annotations or fields we want to have from Atlas.
Yeah, so having an annotation is one way to go, and this is how we implemented it in OpenShift. From our experience, we think that we might want another direction if we are making a proper proposal. So that's why I suggested the remediate function, which is alternative to placing the annotation. So we need to decide if we want to suggest copy to place an annotation on failing node or just call some remediate API. This is just two options we need to decide.
Yeah, yes, we definitely need to discuss that through, but yeah, I would say the annotation won't be bad idea to have, because now when all these machines have this anyway, the field that said they are unhealthy, we also might have some sort of a logic in cluster API that really left that the remediation part to providers. That would be, I think, quite clear then, that if we want to use some other way of remediating our infrastructure or machines, we need to have our own logic, as you said already. But how we call that, and that we need to definitely to discuss.
Okay.
We can still continue slacking tomorrow, and let's see. But is there anybody else who want to add something or ask something, or do you have any ideas?
How it is, because anyway we have a Kubernetes node exporter module which takes care of all the from it takes health check.
Sorry, I can't hear that good. Yeah, sorry.
Is it better now?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Kubernetes node exporter project, which actually gives us all the monitoring and essentially data through Prometheus. It is actually Prometheus node exporter project, which gives us all health check related data of the node. So are you using that module as part of this machine simulation, or you are using another kind of solution?
Sorry, I'm at least I probably have a bad connection, or I still continue losing your sound. So if you can also Slack me, if you can find me, look for Jan Tilles from Slack, from, for example, Kubernetes channel, and send me a message. I'm sorry, I really can't
Okay,
what you said. Sorry about that.
no problem. Maybe I'll Slack you. Yeah.
Yes, please.
I have just one question here. So you were saying that, for example, instead of having the annotation, no matter who is setting, whether it's a health check from the CAPI or whether it's a health check from the Metal3, so instead of using that annotation, we could also call this remediate function from the CAPI, right? Which is the alternative or the way you're thinking, right? But how do you think that it will work for other providers? Because if you're calling the remediate or remediation function from the CAPI itself, how will it be for other providers? Because, for example, for AWS, whatever, then the CAPI, I guess, I mean, CAPI has nothing to do with the infrastructure providers. It's like separate, right? But if you are calling it from the CAPI, that it will come to the Metal3 and then ask for the remediation function to start and so on. So, but in case of other providers, how will it work with if you want to call it from the CAPI? I mean,
So at least in OpenShift, the machine health check controller decides to delete the machine whenever it finds it's unhealthy.
yes.
So I think that, and this is the cluster API actuator, which calls the delete function.
Yes.
So I think that other providers can implement their own remediate function, and if they want to fall back to the existing behavior, they can just call the delete function from the remediate function. That will be the same as today. So I think it's only adding functionality.
Sorry, if I may jump in here, it might be because Nir, you're talking about V1 Alpha 1. In the case of V1 Alpha 3, the controllers are really completely separated. So you wouldn't be able to just add a function in the CAPI controller, right?
Yeah, so that was I was saying at the beginning, that I need to first see what the equivalent for actuator in V1 Alpha 3. Is there any equivalent at all?
It has actually been split completely into different pieces. So if you want to do something like this, that CAPI would transmit some information or call something to do the reboot, then you would need to be offering an API from the provider so that the cluster API can interact with that API. And that API needs then to be standardized across all providers.
So I would still say that annotation is not a bad idea. Then we can check the annotation, additional annotation added to cluster API side, that when we see this annotation, we started our own remediation. So, well, of course, there's at least in my head that might be more straightforward, but well, I'm still open to discussion about, and we definitely need to not, left something out just for the hunch. So you might be also right near that we need to discuss about that option as well, that we have our own API.
Okay,
well,
good input.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, the next point is that during this discussion, we mentioned that we could have this kind of like work group meeting after the Metal3 community meeting if we still have a bit of time on those meetings, or even like after the hour if needed. Because we just discussed this right now, like obviously this is not going to happen today, but this might be like recurring after the Metal3 meeting. Okay, then should we jump to the next topic? It's actually more of like not an announcement, but saying that now this like metadata and network data handling in CAPM3 proposal has been like shaping up quite nicely with the help of Doug. So if you want like to see how it's going, how it would be done, and have a say in there, like please take a look and comment on this. Thanks. The next point is about the CAPM3 v0.3.1. We have had a lot of bugs reported with v1.fr3 for CAPM3. Most of them have been fixed. There's still one now that, well, it has not yet been, the issue has not yet been created, but there is a like last bug that hopefully after that one we can, we will like release the new version of CAPM3 v0.3.1. This hopefully will come tomorrow, sometime during the day. Then I guess Mika, floor is yours about this redfish discussion.
Okay, I can see that Doch Hellman is not participating because we have had a discussion with him in Slack about this issue, because we would like to consider option in Ironic that we would not use the Ironic inspector, neither IPA, so that we would use redfish introspection data in PMO. And the question is that I know that there is a package in Ironic which is capable of doing the introspection, and I passed the SUSI tools so that it will mimic the redfish, and Ironic is happy. But question is that there is no mechanism how to or API exposed where I could fetch that redfish inspection data for PMO usage, because if we skip the Ironic inspector and IPA, we need some inspection data in PMO instead. So I think that this there might be options like change PMO so that PMO would be capable of communicating with redfish protocol to fetch data, or we could extend the Ironic inspector to have the redfish introspection capability, so that PMO could use the existing API to Ironic inspector, or write a totally new type of agent for that purpose. So I get feeling with discussing with Hellman that there is no easy way go, or there is no plans to do anything about this. But I would just want to raise this issue that if there would be some ideas on how to get this forward.
Mika, can I ask a clarification question here? Did you said that you did the work with to modify SUSI tools to include like to make it behave as a redfish endpoint, so that you can use you can do the introspection using SUSI tools, and you say that Ironic was happy about it. So did you mean that Ironic is able to fetch all the data from redfish and store it somehow somewhere?
Yeah, well, it fetches the data, but I'm not sure if it store it at the moment the way that it would be easily fetchable. According to Doug Hellman, it's not storing it in the redfish database, but anyway, it has a capability of marshalling through all the redfish content. So that I did add, for example, this processor emulation into the SUSI tools so that Red was accepting it, and also change some Ethernet interface configuration there. So, so I think Ironic is capable of doing the introspection, but I think the data is not available there for further usage.
Okay, so does this mean that we are just missing the part where BMO queries Ironic, or Ironic doesn't offer any API to allow us to query that data?
I think Ironic doesn't allow any API to fetch that data. So options are that we would extend the PMO itself to do this introspection, or we do the change in Ironic side, so that it would expose the data. But that might mean that it would need to store it into the database, and according to Doch Hellman, it will not do it today. And reason for favoring Redfish is that there is no need for booting the host. So the provisioning process is faster this way. We can save 1 or 2 minutes easily. And I know that the experts are Ilya Etingov and Dimitri Tanchul, which probably, I don't know if they have I know Dimitri has been this inspection expert, and Etingov has been implementing this Redfish module in Ironic, but I know that they're so busy that I haven't managed to get any comment from them.
Is there anyone else on the call that would know about like this kind of like Ironic's internal or be able to like point us to someone who could help with this?
Okay, I have gone through it because we are in HCC proposal. We are actually relying on the inspection data, but current Ironic stores the data either in strict object or as in file, so that data can be pulled anytime. Whenever you fire the command and say will give it the file, Ironic stores that data are available in the prompt itself. So I don't know how Sushi exposes, because Sushi is another library driver which is for Redfish, because when the Ironic introspector does all these things, because in band and out of band introspection this data gets generated. Maybe we can discuss this with Ironic community.
So the folks to reach out to in Ironic would be Doug, Julie, the Julia, Chris Dearborn, Richard Pioso. They all work on this every day.
Right.
So is the idea to just replace Ironic with Redfish introspection? Or supplement?
Replace the IPA for introspection.
What do you do with systems that don't support Redfish? You just going to throw those away?
Well, of course,
older systems. I mean, you got a lot of older systems out there that don't support Redfish and may not have support for Redfish in the near future.
Yeah, we would have this system awareness in the logic so somehow in Kubernetes, so that it would know that when the redfish is available, it would always use redfish. Of course, if there is no redfish, then the IPA is the option.
I posted a link in the Zoom chat. Ironic has some capability to do out-of-band introspection using redfish. I don't know how it works. We could talk to the Ironic folks like Julia to figure out how it works.
Right. I believe.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say. I believe like Decumber says they're using the Sushi API interfaces to do the redfish polling, but Richard would be the one who's doing all the redfish type work. Richard and there's another person, Ilya Eddington. So there's another person you might want to speak to is Ilya.
Actually, as per my understanding, out-of-band introspection are nothing but the cleaning steps which is performed. But maybe, yeah, we should reach Julia. Julia is the right person to reach. She's heading there on.
Yeah, I tried to. I sent mail to Ilya, but it seems that he's so busy. But I can rewrite the mail, and I can also try to contact Richard about this issue. Thanks for the connect.
Yeah, the best way to get a hold of these people is on the Ironic OpenStack Ironic IRC.
Okay. Good to know. Thanks.
Okay, Mika, did we go around the whole topic as you wanted?
Yeah, it seems so that those are the right guys to continue this discussion. So I think I'm fine with this now.
Okay, good. Then let's move to the next topic. Digamba, floor is yours.
Yeah, so I have updated proposal 60, which is for hardware classification controller as per the discussion I had with Doug. Now I think proposal is ready to review completely because we have decided some label concept for multiple profiles and multiple nodes. One node matching to multiple profiles. I request mail and everyone from the community to take a look at it and review it. That's all from my side.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody has any other topic to add here before we move to the issue triage?
Can I ask a quick question, Mail, about the CAPM3 V031 release? Sure. Is there any, do you guys do any validation between the releases of CAPI and the providers and CAPM3? In other words, when I pick up V030, is there an expectation that I should be picking up CAPI, I don't know, 032, 31, 33? Or no, your expectation that any release of CAPI should work?
Exactly. The tests that we run are always with the latest version of CAPI. So it's verified that when we deliver, for example, V031, it's going to be tested right now with the latest of of CAPI V033 right now. But because the contract is not changing within the same minor version, right? So the contract is V1FR3. As long as that doesn't change, any version of CAPI should be working with any version of CAPM3, any should work with any as long as you start with V0.3. something.
I mean, that sounds like wishful thinking, right? I mean, sometimes there's bugs that might have impact one or the other. I was just wondering if when you do a release of CAPM3, do you say this was certified somewhere with version blah, blah, blah of CAPI the last time or something like that? So as a user picking up CAPM3, I know that I'm getting that I should be using a particular version of Cappy as well to at least be at the same level of testing that you guys did.
That's an interesting point, and that's something we don't actually publish, that when we release that has been tested with this version. We could add it in the release notes, definitely, that at the point when we released this, it was tested with that version of Cappy.
Yeah, I think that will be helpful. Make sure that there's no, if you run into trouble, at least you can rule that out as an issue, right? That there's a version problem across the component.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the comment.
Yeah, thanks.
Is there any other topic before we go to the issue triage? Okay, then Stefan, do you want to take over?
Yeah, can do.
I was gonna, sorry, before you move on. That whole idea of moving introspection to BMO, right? That sounds like foo to me, because isn't that notion, the previous topic, the redfish inspection thing, is that really a valid path, you think, the introspection to BMO? Since wasn't the idea that BMO is interacting with some driver where ironic is the driver, and so introspection is a function of the driver, unless introspection is its own separate function and you can have different introspecting drivers. In other words, wouldn't you be corrupting the abstraction if you move it into BMO?
Mar, can you help me about this because you had this
Yeah. Well, I would say that if it stays within ironic, as it seems that ironic is able to do the introspection with redfish, then we are not really changing any of the abstraction on the BMO side.
Agreed. But there was a comment in there, and you don't have line numbers, I can tell you that you says are to extend BMO to do the introspection.
Ah, yeah. Okay, this line here.
Yeah. So that to me is what I'm saying, that would change the abstraction of BMO, because now it's taking on a function that is currently lives within ironic, or lives within the driver that you're talking to, if you will. If there was
is not the preferred option. I think the preferred option is that we would get it from the ironic one way or other. But of course, if
hi everyone. Sorry, I was distracted before, and I just saw the discussion about the redfish inspection, introspection. So just FYI, so I work upstream with Ironic, and I'm Ricardo, by the way, from Red Hat. So FYI, the document that Stefan just linked before in the chat is basically the correct document to point to the redfish inspection capabilities of Ironic in terms of out-of-band inspection. For the in-band inspection, you will have to rely on the IPA agent and specifically on Ironic Inspector if you want to get that. It's basically two different ways of approaching the same problem. While on out-of-band inspection, you rely directly on a driver inside Ironic, which is redfish in this case. The inspector API, the inspector process with the usage of the Ironic Python agent in the RAM disk, it will give you a much better overview of the nodes that you're going to enroll in Ironic. So I'm not sure exactly like what's missing here.
So are you saying that redfish is not an option for IPA at all, so that we cannot use redfish as kind of lightweight inspection and avoid this booting sequence and avoid using IPA at all?
Well, you can decide to not use the ironic Python agent, but you will not get the same level of details.
Yes, that's true.
It's two different ways, you know. Instead of basically having an operating system running directly on the nodes and collecting all kind of data, you just rely on the redfish data, on the redfish driver, which is based on Sushi library, to contact the BMC using the redfish API if available, and just collecting the data from there.
Yes.
It's two different ways, you know, to approach the same thing.
Okay, and Ricardo, would you have any knowledge of what's the current state of this, the implementation of this out-of-band inspection in Ironic with redfish?
It's completely supported. Again, if you check the document that Stephen just linked in the chat before, you will see that you have out-of-band inspection. So I'm reading just from the document because it's there. The redfish hardware type can inspect their bare metal node by querying redfish compatible BMC. This process is quick and reliable compared to the way the inspector hardware type works. So built-in bare metal node into the introspection RAM disk. So please don't confuse inspection and introspection. Inspection is something that it's done on ironic side and it's usually out of band, while introspection is done in band and it uses the ironic Python agent that contacts the ironic inspector process.
And for the ones that don't understand, so the data set resulting from introspection versus inspection, I'm assuming that there's a large overlap, but there's also gaps between them. Is there anything in those gaps that are is there a documented place that says, oh, here are the gaps, here are the things that are different, so one can determine whether introspection is actually necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. I invite you to check the ironic inspector documentation and the ironic Python agent documentation. You will find a lot of information there. And also we use, to get all the extra information, we use a library called Python hardware. I also work on that upstream. And basically we try to collect as much information as possible on all the hardware present in the system. And again, ironic Python agent uses this library also. So it's not limited to one specific driver like redfish, for example, but it extends also from to other tools, using other tools. I can point, like I can give you some documentation. So this is definitely something that I'm just linking the ironic inspector documentation in the chat. That basically the title is Hardware Introspection for OpenStack Bare Metal. And you will find a lot of information there about how we do introspection.
So I guess where I was going with this as a question really is so given that the whole discussion here was about essentially, I think, doing inspection instead of the introspection, does this mean that we would want to have the option have a mechanism to tell BMO, I don't really want introspection, I want inspection, because the data set that comes out of inspection is enough for what I care about, or not? Or is that not a real thing?
It's just a matter of configuration.
But configuration but today that's not a configuration that configuration is done when you deploy ironic, I'm assuming, as opposed to when.
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
When, if you want, yeah.
Ironic is not. This is not something that you can pick and choose at the per server, if you will. This particular BMH, I'm just making up this use case. I don't think this is the real thing, but this particular BMH, I need introspection versus this other one, I need inspection only type of thing. That's not a real thing, you don't say?
Well, usually you rely on the two different ways depending on how deep you need to go to enroll your nodes, how many information you need on your nodes. Of course, you can just, if you have only Redfish nodes, for example, you know that they are capable of offering you a Redfish API with a specific version, by the way, because you have like also different versions supported. So you just want to use that, then you enable the Redfish driver and you just do the inspection using out-of-band inspection directly from Ironic. But if you instead want to have a more granular information and you need this information for specific reasons that can be, I don't know, like you need LLDP data or something like that, or if like very specific information on ride controllers that you can't get from Redfish or contacted the BNC, then the introspection is the way to go.
So so the Redfish APIs, there are two aspects of that, right? They're changing pretty frequently now that they have a new release every 6 months or something. And there's also the fact that there are vendor specific outlier situations where
definitely.
So how is that ironic?
We actually had to So we had to we actually had to develop an OEM library for Dell hardware, which is a Sushi OEM iDRAC library, and that is specific for the Dell vendor. And it's available again. It's upstream. You can easily find it. But just to demonstrate what you just said, just to basically confirm what you said, that you don't only have different Redfish versions from the standard, but you also have specific versions from vendors that maybe like just slightly modify the Redfish standard to allow usage of OEM options from the vendors. So if you notice, for example, in the configuration, in Metal3 configuration in Ironic, you will see that you have the iDRAC driver enabled, you have the Redfish driver enabled, and then you have the iDRAC Redfish driver enabled.
An additional question, if you don't mind, like because you have all those drivers enabled, you can choose for each host which driver it's using, right? So you could say, like,
yes,
this host, I want to use the Redfish inspection driver, or I want to use the IPA introspection.
Yes, of course you can do that.
Okay. So it's basically just a matter of if you would want to not use introspection for a host, it's just a matter of having the BMO Redfish driver give the correct parameters so that it uses Redfish inspection under the hood, right?
You can do that, and usually you do that if you want to be like quickly, if you want to have a quick process in, but consider that especially when you do the first like a first enrollment of nodes, and if you work in a complex environment, like for example with different networks or stuff like that, or your servers have complex configuration, usually, and also if you want to monitor in a certain way changes in the hardware of the server, for example, usually the introspection is what you want to use. So of course you can use inspection, just the bare out of band one, but well, it's like I wouldn't do that for, especially on the first place.
Okay, so if Ironic supports this, as it supports this Redfish inspection, I'm still confused that what is the way to get it get if the PMO would use that data to, for example, selecting the or if that data would be exposed in bare metal host object, and then that would be enough. So PMO would need that data. What would be the API to fetch that data? Is it through the Ironic inspector or directly from Ironic?
So the out of band is directly in Ironic.
But so there is an API.
Well, the
Because
API will be on the server side. If the Redfish API. I'm talking about the driver that enables Ironic to contact the Redfish API.
Yeah, so there is no REST API in Ironic which I could use to fetch this data.
So Mika, you're talking like after the inspection has been done, you want to fetch the data from Ironic. Is that the use case you're talking?
Yes.
Well, isn't that the normal Ironic API?
Well, I set the Ironic configuration for Redfish inspection, and at least I walked through the whole Ironic REST path, and I didn't find any hint that what that would be, and I've been asking around that what would be the way to fetch it. I haven't found any documentation which would describe this one.
You will fetch the information as you fetch normal information from any node in Ironic. You don't have a specific API for a Redfish. You have the Ironic API. You contact that, you will get the information of the node contacting the Ironic API. It's not like different. It's completely transparent from user's perspective.
Okay, so maybe I have to just find the right document which would describe this, because at least it's not like usually REST APIs that when you walk through the REST, it will always show you the options forward, deeper in the path.
Sounds like Mika can't find the correct REST API to call to get the information back.
Yes, if there is a document about it, I would be really happy to look.
Again, I can point you to this document that I'm linking in the chat now, which is the official reference for the bare metal API in OpenStack, and it's the one used by Ironic. You can find all the information of a node just contacting, that like show node details, for example, or stuff like that. But just check the document there.
Okay, I double checked. Yes, thanks.
But Ricardo, aren't those Python APIs?
Sorry?
Aren't those Python calls?
These
APIs?
are just like REST APIs.
Okay.
So yeah.
So assuming that we are willing to trade efficiency versus detailed knowledge of the hardware, we should now have everything in place to use inspection instead of introspection with Redfish, provided that BMO is modified to fetch that information from Ironic instead of fetching the introspection data from Ironic inspector. Is that right?
I'm going to advise against that, by the way, just just to basically rest my point in terms of so that the Redfish driver and the Redfish API are of course available in terms of getting information for a node and some data, but it could definitely happen that you will find something. So first of all, you need to to consider non-redfish compliant BMCs, and also you might find in some ways that the redfish standard might not be supported or not correctly supported, and that of course will make the inspection fail.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure.
Just
thanks. Okay, well, thank you all for this very nice and very informative discussion. We have only 9 minutes left for the issue triage. Let's see if we can go through like this.
Yeah, I can share my screen if you stop sharing.
Sure. Just give me a sec.
It looks like there are 9 untriaged issues, so hopefully we have enough time. Let me share my browser window. Okay, can you see my browser window?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's open a bunch of these in tabs. Okay. So the first one is a proposal for auto scaling for machine sets to the Metal3 docs repo. Looks like we tried to triage this before. It didn't look like the tag got added. I may not have this actually enabled on the docs repo. Oh, no, I do. Okay. Do we want to put a priority on this? I mean, it's just, it looks like it's mostly just discussion.
Maybe long term then.
Well, there's actually a commit that's linked. Is this actually completed then?
It is. The thing is, this is in the old repository, and it was on the branch v1 alpha 1, so probably not.
Yeah. Is this even applicable anymore with v1 alpha 3?
I mean, the commit as is will probably not be transferable, but the ID, of course, remains valid.
Okay. I'll tag it long term then. Okay. The next one is another 3 docs. Is another docs one. Enable scaling up by grabbing bare metal hosts consumed by other clusters. So this is the idea of like auto scaling or like sharing nodes between clusters, I think. It seems like we previously tried to triage these, but they weren't picked up by the Metal3 bot. Okay. All right. The next one is handle dual stack configuration for NIC IP. This PR fixes an issue where the IP is not populated for the single stack IPv6 case. But as mentioned, the review comment doesn't solve the case where the NIC gets both IPv4 and IPv6. Okay.
Yeah, the issue here is the API doesn't support giving more than, like listing more than one IP address for a NIC in the introspection data. And so right now we fixed it so it'll handle if it's IPv4 or IPv6, because previously it only looked for an IPv4 address. But now we need an API change that lets you list more than one IP address. And that was more than the quick fix. And the quick fix made it better than it was, but it's just, it pointed out that there's actually more to do.
All right. So we assume that a NIC only has a single IP.
Yeah. So that
Okay.
need to do something different. I mean, we can, yeah. I guess the ideal thing would, that should become a list.
Yeah. Okay. Is this a feature?
I guess
Bug?
it depends if you want to consider dual stack a feature or bug. It's probably more of a feature.
I mean, even outside of the dual stack case, it's not unreasonable for a NIC to have multiple IPs, right?
Yeah, that's true. Not the common case, but it's certainly possible. Yeah, I don't know. Call it. It's sort of a bug or feature. I'd call it a feature.
Okay.
It's a feature for IPv6 support.
Well, you could have more than one IPv4 address potentially, but yeah.
Do you have a sense of the priority on this? I assume it's something we need to tackle soon, right?
Yeah. Well, what are the priority choices again? No, it's probably more like somebody from Red Hat will have to pick it up in the next month or two.
Important soon?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. The next one is disk status is not showing in hardware introspection data in CR.
Hey, Stephen, this is Sumit from Dell Calsoft team. So we had raised this issue for showing the disk status, but I think Digambar already has discussed this with Doug Hellman, and they are fine with the not showing the status. So I think Digambar can probably update this issue with the latest comments or discussion they had.
So is this the case that Ironic isn't giving us the data, or that we need to expose more information that Ironic is giving us in the BMO?
Yes, this information is fetched by Ironic, but we were not sure whether the disk state should also return whether it is failed or proper, or but I mean, what information we have got is this is whatever data is fetched is all correct data. I mean, there is no failure as such. So we assume that BMO has the updated data, which is correct.
Sorry, it was kind of hard to hear you with the background noise.
Sorry, just a second.
Oh, no worries. Okay, so I mean, are we happy with this issue as is? Do we want to triage it, or is this something that we need to take elsewhere?
I think Digambar was going to update his discussion. Probably we can try this in the next week based on their discussion or with the comment.
Okay. So how do you want to label this?
I'm not very sure about the kind of bug, you can say, but
Sure.
needs confirmation. Needs confirmation. I'm not very sure.
But if it's something we want to add, maybe a feature would be better there.
Well, okay. Yes.
Okay. And backlog for this, or do you have a preference about priority?
I'm a little unsure. It would have been better if Digambar had joined this, but.
Unless someone plans to work on it soon, we put it in the backlog typically.
Well, okay. Maybe put it in awaiting more evidence, because from what I understood, you said there was a discussion between Digambar and Doug where they reached the point that this was maybe not needed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Better.
Okay. Sounds good. It looks like we're at the hour. Do we want to continue the triage in the next meeting? There's 5 left, or do you want to keep going?
Fine to keep going to quickly go through to finish them.
Yeah, well, let me just make sure I don't have anything else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
I can stay for a little bit longer. So the next one is firmware-related values are absent in node introspection data using Redfish.
Yeah, so this is raised by me. I'm Sumit here. So I think our team is going to have a further development of the hardware classification controller based on the values which are seen here. So probably it might help them further down the line. So currently they are seen as a blank. I mean, we do not receive any values in it for the Dell hardware right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but
would you say this is a bug?
Yeah.
And what about priority?
It is important, not critical as such, but maybe important. So.
Okay. The next one is standardized log timestamps of bare metal operator. Okay, it looks like for some reason we log things differently.
That could be maybe a good first issue.
Yeah, I see that comment. We have a label for that, right?
With help wanted, maybe. Yeah.
And backlog.
Sure.
Shouldn't take the backlog. There we go. Cool, thank you. Next one is freeze cubeatom, kubelet, and kubectl version.
Yeah, this is already being actively developed, actively worked on. So
okay.
It's a bug, and you can put like soon because it's active.
Yeah, if it's actively being worked on, I don't think we need to set a priority since someone's already taking care of it. Okay. The next one is junk data observed in node introspection data with latest bare metal operator code.
Yeah, so I have attached the log file here. So we also see the actual data and these additional parameters where there is no output, I mean no values. So there's one file as well.
Okay.
So sorry, just to understand what's the problem there. Because this just lists the managed fields. Is the problem for you that it is there, or?
I mean, we during our testing, I mean, this was our second or third attempt, but in the first attempt, we did not see these parameters present. But in the recent attempt, we saw these parameters plus the actual values. If you can open the attachment, it will be more clear, I suppose.
I can't show it. I'm only sharing my browser.
Yeah, but so basically the idea is that this was added when you do, like, for example, kubectl get the BMH,
yeah.
right?
I mean, this is post your introspection is done.
But isn't that related to the version of the Kubernetes API that you're using?
That I'm not pretty sure, but like. So you see actual data is present and then this parameters also, like, I mean, the whole point was like there is a repetition. If that is not correct, then you may put the issue in appropriate category. But here is the actual data is present.
Yeah, but what is this? What is the managed fields part of this output? Isn't that just Kubernetes giving us information about the CR?
Pardon? I mean, I did not get.
Yeah, so if I can shed a tiny bit of light here, this manage fields, that's something that comes with Kubernetes 1.18. So it's a new feature.
Okay, so yeah, so I see, yeah, so earlier attempt, I think we did with 1.17 and there we did not see this. So maybe with the upgrade of Kubernetes version, this has been appended, right? Be a possibility.
Yeah, so if you have a like version 1.18, you probably will get that.
Right. Maybe.
If you have a server-side
Okay.
apply.
So this looks like.
So it says here in the documentation of the API concepts that the field management is now stored in a newly introduced manage fields field that is part of the object's metadata.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say this is a bug. We should probably just
we can close that. I mean, we just raised it for the sake that there is some addition and we saw it different from the earlier attempt. So.
Is that right?
Yeah, from the mail can. Yeah, I think, yeah, then we can close this.
Okay. Okay, two more. VMO should have customized config for test setup with VMO standalone. Oh, when using kind cluster Metal3 dev env, Ironic needs to run outside the cluster. It would be handy to have similar customized config for VMO standalone. I see.
Yeah, so I see Mika is still in the call.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. It's we would like to introduce in Metal3 an option that we could use kind instead of Minikube, and in kind cluster this Ironic has to run outside the cluster. So we would need a different customized profile for that one, that we deploy only the PMO manifests into the cluster and leave the Ironic running outside the cluster. And for complete setup, when we deploy everything into the cluster, there is this kind of customized config setup made for Minikube use, and it would be nice if you would have a similar config for this Ironic or PMO standalone use.
Yeah, so this is a small improvement and it's actively worked on. So I guess we can just put maybe feature and that's it.
Okay, that sounds good. The last one, oh, that's not that. Yeah, sorry, that was one I opened. That was from Kubernetes about this. So that should be it. Let me refresh this page. Yep, that's it for the triage.
Cool, thanks.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.